Good evening, everyone. So yesterday was my 29th birthday. Thank you. So that means I basically have 12 months to go before the big 30th birthday, or as I like to call it, my 3-decade interim life assessment. And I want to do really well in it. And so as a good academic, I've been doing my research, and I have been looking up all of these, things that you should have done by the time you're 30. Now, maybe I'm just incredibly boring, but most of these lists seem to be full of things that are a danger to myself or my finances or both. And I genuinely don't think I'm going to wake up at 50 and regret never having gone crowd surfing. I mean, physics conferences don't tend to be set up for that anyway. But I kind of think we need a separate list. We need a special list just for the academics and researchers of 30 things we need to have done by the time we're 30. So, for example, get a PhD. Check. Go to a conference at an exotic location. Check. Leeds is beautiful in September, by the way. Or maybe even go to a party and talk to people and have not a single person there actually know what it is you're doing every day. Check, check, check. So you get really creative in describing what it is you actually do for a living. So me, I am a theoretical quantum physicist. So, thanks. So being a theoretical quantum physicist, it's a little bit like being psychic. Only if a psychic made a prediction like, Brian, John is going to punch you, and then spends the next 3 years writing papers and publishing them about why John should punch Brian, what will happen if John punches Brian, some of the societal and economic impacts of John punching Brian, all in the hopes that John will read all these papers and decide that yes, punching Brian is an excellent idea. That's just the theoretical part of the theoretical quantum physics. Then there's the quantum part. Quantum physics has kind of a reputation of being odd. I don't think we kind of help ourselves with that reputation, because we come up with these, I don't know if you've come across these thought experiments. So it's kind of like we come up with a scenario and we kind of rationalize theoretically what would happen if this scenario was real. So it's kind of like what I did earlier when I talked about going to parties and people talking to me. But I mean, when we talk about quantum physics, we talk about like all these wonderful new technologies that are on the horizon: quantum computers, quantum teleportation, and cryptography. And what we tend to gloss over just a little bit are some of the more challenging aspects, the road bumps that quantum physics throws in our path. One example would be transport. Now, I'm not talking about an incredibly complicated physics concept here, so I'm going to give a demonstration now. So I'm going to move this ball from here to here, and I'm going to do it classically, so not quantumly, okay? So that was fairly straightforward, right? You could probably all manage that at home. If you try and do that with a quantum object like an atom or a single photon like a particle of light, basically all hell breaks loose. So the first problem is it's very hard to move something that is both a particle and a wave at the same time. It's even more difficult to move something when you're not entirely sure where it is. So say I have a single atom and I have it in an atom bucket, technical term. So I have this atom bucket, in an atom bucket, and I want to move it, transport it from this atom bucket to one I have over here, right? Unless I do this ridiculously precisely, like impossibly precisely timed, what I actually end up with is one atom which is in both buckets at the same time. So say I want to check and see if my little experiment has worked. So I look into the second bucket and see what's happened. There's a couple of outcomes. I might look in there and see that my atom has successfully transferred and I'm happy. Or the very act of me looking into the second bucket causes the atom to reappear in the first bucket. Not what I was going for. And of course all of this assumes that you don't have a little bully atom or photon that kind of kicks over one of your buckets while you're working. So the upshot of this is that quantum physics is that thing that makes incredibly complicated, impossible things very, very simple and straightforward, but makes very simple and straightforward things incredibly complicated. It's kind of like someone with a PhD who can't open a door. So if you're kind of finding this quantum physics thing a little bit weird and off-putting and confusing, have a little bit of sympathy for those of us who actually have to work on it on a day-to-day basis. So there was a survey done, it was published online, by an Austrian physicist called Anton Zeilinger. Now this guy is like super, super famous for a quantum physicist. He's the Arnold Schwarzenegger of quantum physics. So he went to a conference with other quantum physicists, and he did a kind of a survey which he describes as a snapshot of foundational attitudes towards quantum mechanics. So in it he asks the burning questions that keep us all awake at night, like, for example, do physical objects have their properties well defined prior to and independent of measurement? I know. It's 50-50 between the quantum physicists. I'm not sure which is which. But I highly recommend you download this paper. So next time you're at a party and you get talking to your local theoretical quantum physicist, unemployed or not, you can kind of cheat your way through the entire conversation. So you can say something like, so my preferred interpretation of quantum physics is the Copenhagen interpretation, 42%. But if you're feeling a bit out there, but the de Broglie bomb interpretation has a certain whimsical charm, 0%. But I mean, the reason I actually, have a job and work as a quantum physicist is, kind of things we do is try to overcome these roadblocks, like road bumps, like the transport thing I talked about earlier. So one of the methods that we came up with that I worked on during my PhD, so similar setup to before, atom buckets, remember? Only this time instead of 2 atom buckets, you have 3. So it's already simpler. So you start with your atom in the first atom bucket and you want to move it to the third one. So you're probably thinking, okay, your first job is you're going to move it from the first to the second. That's actually the wrong direction. What you want to do first, you want to move it from the second to the third. And it's only then that you move it from the first to the second. And if you do this correctly, it will jump from the first to the third, and it will never actually be in the second one at all. So this is a little counterintuitive, a little bit odd, typical of quantum mechanics, but this is a real thing. It's a thing that's been proven. It works. I've seen it work, which is to say I've drawn graphs of it working. I've written papers about it working. And now I just need to find someone to punch Brian. Thanks very much.